All right, everyone, welcome. We're about to dive into a topic that is, and I'm not exaggerating here, the absolute foundation for your entire career as an auditor. We're talking about IT General Controls, or GITCs. Now, for you, as future accounting and audit pros, this isn't just some techie stuff you have to learn. No, this is the bedrock, it's the ground you stand on when you say you have assurance over a company's financial reporting. So let's get into it and break down what these controls really are. Here's our game plan. We're going to kick things off by making sure we all understand the huge difference between general controls and application controls. From there, we'll build our way up from the ground floor, the network, the OS, and the database. Then we'll focus on what I think is the most important control of all, change management. And finally, we'll tie all this technical knowledge back to the assurance framework you'll actually be using out in the field. I really want you to let this question sink in, because this is everything. Your job as an auditor is to give an opinion, to provide assurance on a company's numbers. But think about it. If the systems where those numbers are born and live are built on a shaky, unreliable foundation, how can you possibly trust anything that comes out of them? The simple answer is you can't. And that's exactly why GITCs exist. They are the foundation.
So let's tackle the first, and maybe the most important, distinction you need to get straight in your head. Not all IT controls are the same. There's a clear hierarchy. And if you don't understand that hierarchy, you won't understand the risk.
The easiest way to think about this is the house analogy. IT General Controls, that's the whole house. It's the strong foundation, the sturdy walls, the secure front door, and the alarm system. Application controls, those are just the locks on the individual bedroom doors inside the house. Now, you could have the most advanced, unbreakable lock on the door to the accounting office, right? But what good is it if a thief can just walk in the front door because the GITCs are weak? Or worse, what if they can just knock down a wall? You see the problem? GITCs are pervasive. That means a single crack in that foundation doesn't just put one room at risk. It jeopardizes the entire house. And that's exactly why we, as auditors, always start here. A GITC failure isn't just a small, isolated issue. It sends out ripples. It's a systemic problem that can poison the well for every single application and every single business process that depends on that IT environment. So for you, getting assurance over GITCs, well, it's not optional. It's always step one. Okay, so let's start building this house from the ground up. The very first layers of our IT environment are the network and the operating system. This is the concrete and the wiring that everything else relies on. You can think of the network as the digital plumbing of a company. But here's the key. The way that plumbing is designed is a control in itself. A smart company uses something called network segmentation. They build digital walls to create separate, isolated zones. That way, if a problem happens in one area, it's contained. It can't spread easily through the whole system. And the firewalls are the security guards at the gates between these zones. They operate on a simple but powerful principle: deny by default. That means nothing gets through unless it has a very specific, pre-approved reason. Your job as the auditor is to go test those rules and make sure the guards are actually doing their job. I love this description of the OS as the central nervous system. It's perfect, because the OS is the ultimate authority on any given computer. It decides who can log in, what they're allowed to touch, and what programs they can even run. For you, as an auditor, this is critical. The OS is the root of trust for every single piece of evidence you pull from a machine. And this gets to a point that you absolutely cannot forget. If the operating system is compromised, then nothing that comes from that computer can be trusted. Not the logs, not the financial reports, nothing. An attacker who owns the OS can change any piece of data they want before you ever lay eyes on it. That's why testing OS-level security isn't just a good idea, it's a fundamental part of any competent IT audit. So, we've secured the pathways with the network and the central nervous system with the OS. Now we move up the stack to the real prize, the data itself. And that data almost always lives in a database, which acts as its own powerful fortress. This is a really important concept to grasp. So let's say a business application has a rule that says you can't enter a negative dollar amount for a sale. Okay, that's an application control. But the database management system, the DBMS, is the final say. The database itself can have its own ironclad rule that says this column can never, under any circumstances, contain a negative number, period. You see what that means? Even if someone finds a clever way to bypass the application's flimsy rule, the database itself slams the door shut. That makes the database an incredibly powerful last line of defense and a huge area of focus for auditors. This table is great because it shows you how these high-level GITC domains become real, tangible things you can actually test inside a database. So, when your audit manager talks about logical access,
What are you actually looking for? Well, you're auditing user roles, who has what permissions, and you're looking at the specific grant and revoke commands that have been issued. Change management. You're investigating who has the power to change the very structure, the schema of the database. And IT operations? That maps directly to things like backup procedures and transaction logs. It's where the theory becomes practice.
All right, now I want to zoom in on one specific JIC that kind of sits above all the others. It's so critical that some people call it a meta-control, because it's the guardian that protects the integrity of every other control we've talked about, and that is change management. Look, in a well-run organization, developers can't just make changes to critical systems whenever they feel like it. That would be chaos. Instead, there's a formal, disciplined process. Every single change, even a tiny one, starts with a formal request. Then it has to be rigorously tested in a separate, safe environment to make sure it doesn't break anything. Only after it passes testing does it go before a board for final approval to be moved into the live system. This strict process is the only thing that stands between stability and a complete disaster caused by one bad, untested change.
This is why auditors are so obsessed with change management. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a developer is under a tight deadline. They decide to skip the process and make a quick fix directly to the live production system. That one unauthorized change could introduce a bug that silently miscalculates every single sale. Or even worse, it could open up a massive security hole. A single failure in the change management process can completely obliterate the value of every other control. As an auditor, you have to get comfortable with this process before you can even think about relying on anything else.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of technical ground. The network, the OS, databases, change management. But here comes the most important part for you. How do we connect all this tech speak back to the actual language of a financial audit? How does this stuff help you form an opinion on the financial statements?
This slide right here, this is your Rosetta Stone. This is how you translate the tech into what really matters for your audit. When you test logical access controls, what you're really doing is making sure that only authorized people can create transactions. That directly supports the validity assertion that transactions are real. When you test change management controls, you're making sure the system's logic is correct and processes data reliably. That supports the accuracy of the numbers. And when you test backups, you're ensuring no data is lost, which supports the completeness assertion. See, these aren't just IT controls, they're financial audit controls.
And it's important to note that the work you're doing isn't happening in some random vacuum. It plugs directly into globally recognized IT governance frameworks like COBIT. When you're out there auditing logical access, you're actually testing against Objective DSS-05 from the COBIT framework. Your change management testing maps to BIO6. This is huge. It shows that your detailed hands-on work is a vital piece of assessing a company's overall strategy for managing risk.
If there's one core message I want you to walk away with today, it's this. These controls are a deeply interconnected web. You can't just look at them one by one. A weakness in how they manage change immediately makes you question their access controls. A poorly secured operating system makes you doubt the integrity of the database running on top of it. You have to think holistically, because a failure in one single thread can cause the entire web to unravel.
And that leads us to our final big picture idea. It's not enough for a control to just exist on paper. We have to ask, how good is it? How mature is the process? In auditing, we often use a 5-level maturity model. The goal, the gold standard, is to get to level 5. A company at level 1 is just chaotic and reactive, but a company at level 5, they have an optimized process, they're constantly measuring it, improving it, and proactively managing risk instead of just putting out fires.
And I'll leave you with this question, because this is what separates a check-the-box auditor from a truly great one. Your job isn't just to ask, does a firewall exist? Yes or no. The real value-added question is about maturity. Is the process for managing that firewall robust? Is this organization building a culture of security that can handle not just today's threats, but the unknown threats of tomorrow? Answering that question, that's how you provide real assurance and lasting value.